What causes our anxiety to form? This is probably one of the most popular questions. But before I get into it, let me say something. The causes of your anxiety are important to figure out. But once we do figure out those causes, it's time to move forward. This shouldn't be something that we sit in and ponder in and try to figure out in so much detail that it actually just causes more stress and anxiety. So once we do figure out the cause, which can be important, it's time to find those strategies and those perspective changing tools to move forward. So finding the causes is important, but if we don't have those tools, then those causes can come up again and produce the same results, which is our anxious state now. So a few of the causes would be trauma, like losing a loved one, relationship problems, social problems, loneliness, work stress, environment and upbringing, and the list can go on and on. But again, once we figure out those causes, it's time to get the tools to move forward so those causes don't produce the same results. Because the main thing about those causes is that they can be traumatic, they can be stressful and very difficult to deal with. And for that very reason, we tend to avoid them, or we tend to suppress them, or we tend to try to numb them instead of looking at them and facing them head on and dealing with them. And that first starts with accepting the situation, accepting the cause, and then going from there with the tools to move forward to change our relationship to those causes. So the causes are important, but once we have the tools to move forward, then it's time to change our relationship to those causes so that we get a different result, which isn't our anxious state. And if you're talking about the physical part of anxiety, all that stuff that we don't take care of builds up inside of us, and we can numb it and suppress it as much as we want. But the truth is that when it does come out, because we haven't been taking care of it, then no amount of suppressing or numbing it is going to matter, because it's going to be so powerful and we're going to have no tools on how to deal with it. Those strong sensations, those really powerful, disturbing, overwhelming thoughts, if we have no tools and our relationship is just fear and avoidance, then we're just going to keep compounding on that anxiety over and over and over again. So again, those causes, which I just listed a few, are important to recognize, but they're important to recognize solely so that we can find different tools, because what we're doing isn't working. So different tools to move forward to then change our relationship to those causes so that when they happen again, or when those problems fester up again, we don't give the same results. The new strategies, the new techniques that we are implementing into our lives will produce different results as we keep moving forward. So the causes are important, but what's more important after we figure out the causes is not to ruminate and problem solve so much that it becomes a new problem, but it's to find new ways of dealing with those causes so we produce different results. Will my anxiety ever go away? This question caused me so much stress and anxiety. And it seems like just a very matter-of-fact, straightforward question. Hey, will my anxiety ever go away? But that's not how we're asking it, and that's not how I asked it. It was more of a desperate attempt to get an answer that I wanted to hear. And that answer was, yes, it'll go away, just do this and it's gone. So we're asking that question through a fear lens, through an avoidance lens, and we're looking for somewhat of an impossible answer that we know probably doesn't exist, but we want it to so bad. And that wanting our anxiety to go away right now and wanting that answer is one of the reasons that our anxiety cycles keep moving and perpetuating forward like this. So a short answer would be, yeah, your anxiety always goes away, and then it comes back, and then it goes away, and then it comes back. Some people have less, some people have more. Some people, it's not that much of a problem. Some people, like maybe you watching this, are like, for me, what it was, it's a massive problem. It's a big problem. But that's part of the problem, is our relationship to it is we need it to go away right now so that it never comes back and we can go back to living our old lives. but our old lives are what got us here to ask this question in the first place. So we need to start learning those tools to move forward, to change our perspective, because we want to change our relationship to that question. It's all about changing your relationship and your perspective, because you can move forward and still have anxiety, sensations, kind of overwhelming, disturbing thoughts. But if we're changing our relationship through knowledge, through compassion and patience, through allowance and acceptance, through doing the little exercises that I've said in other videos, through a meditation practice, then that question doesn't have the same weight, because we won't be asking it. We'll know that we are implementing the things that we need to go forward to change our relationship to our anxiety. So when our anxiety does come up, or our thoughts come up, we're not asking, when will these go away? We understand them. We can accept them right here, right now, as they are, without trying to run away or avoid. And we can eliminate this question completely from our vocabulary. How do we calm our anxiety? Of course, a popular question, because everybody wants to feel calm. Now, there's a lot of tricks, a lot of gimmicks, a lot of quick breathing exercises, and those can all help here in the moment, briefly, to maybe have your anxiety subside or create a little bit of a distraction so that you're not thinking about your anxiety as much, which those can all be beneficial here, now, quickly. But I'm all about your long-term solutions. What are the long-term solutions for you, your mental health, and a joyful and fulfilling life that's filled with more peace and calm, because you have control of your anxiety and your emotions and how you deal with them. So while those short-term things can be nice in the moment, doesn't solve the issue of how you're viewing your anxiety, that fear response and that avoidant response. So we want to learn how to produce long-term calm and peace, because hopefully we have a nice long life to live, and we don't want to have to keep implementing these short-term tricks, gimmicks, or breathing exercises. We want long-term results. And it starts with daily practices that have us look at our anxiety instead of immediately reacting and judging to it. That starts with a meditation practice, a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening, where you find a quiet place that you can sit and be with yourself. And when the thoughts arise, you bring yourself back to the breath. When those sensations arise, you see them and you bring yourself back to the breath. Thoughts arise, you see them, back to the breath. What this does is it allows that gap to form so that you're not reacting to those thoughts or sensations, but you're seeing them, holding them for a second, and then coming back to your object of meditation. And that is by far the greatest tool, and science and research shows this, to produce calming effects. And the more you do it, the more it leaks into your daily life, and I like to say your anxious life as well. There's also ways to do meditation, but not just sitting there still. And I've said these in some other videos, where you can focus on brushing your teeth, feeling the bristles and the toothpaste and the water in your mouth and the hum of the electric toothbrush. And when you drift, you come back to what you're doing. Or on a walk, you feel your feet anchored into the earth. You hear the birds in the trees, you feel the weather. And when you drift to a sensation or a scary thought, you come back to walking. When you're talking to a friend or a partner, you're fully there listening to the words that they're saying. You hear it. And when you drift off, you come back to what they're saying and be fully present with them. And these are things that can accumulate throughout the day. And over time, if you really are intentional about doing them, you will see it leak into your anxious life and produce more calm and more long-term calm and peace. And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for immediate calm. Maybe sometimes, which is okay. But we want to be able to produce long-term calm and peace to lead a more joyful and fulfilling life, so anxiety doesn't have that hold over us like it used to. And that starts with daily practices that bring ourselves to the moment and not judge or run away from our thoughts and our sensations and just come back to what we're doing. That will produce long-term calm, and that's what I'm here for and what I'm trying to do for you. What is extreme anxiety? Now, this question can vary based on opinions, but to me, extreme anxiety is when your anxious life has leaked into your normal daily life, when it's interfering with your ability to function and enjoy your life, then I believe it's extreme anxiety. This doesn't mean that you're sick or have a disease. It just means that your anxiety has gotten to a point where it's now interfering with your daily life. And that's okay. It really is okay, because I've been there. That's happened to me. And now I lead a life that has much more joy and fulfillment in it. And I still do have some anxiety, plenty of anxiety, but it just doesn't have the hold over me, that extreme hold like it did before. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, what he just said, I have extreme anxiety, it's totally fine. It's totally okay. Because there is a point where you can not have extreme anxiety, because you've been at that point. So you know it's there. But now we're going to get to that point again, but in a totally different way, so that all those things that cause the extreme anxiety can't do it anymore, because you've built that confidence and strengthened that muscle, that acceptance muscle. So extreme anxiety is when it starts to interfere with your daily life and your ability to function and enjoy your life. For me, I couldn't really go out with my friends the same way. I just couldn't. I wasn't there. I was in here just calculating everything that was going on, trying to solve every problem while people were talking to me or laughing or making jokes. And I kind of be like, oh, and then I'd be in the back of my head. The relationship at the time, I was had a short fuse. I snapped. I wasn't very fun to be around because I was constantly stressed about this problem that I had, my problem. And even when I tried to think about other people or think, oh man, am I affecting other people with it was really starting because I felt sorry for what I had. Now, all those things are okay. They're places that we have to go to be able to see that they're not working, and we can start implementing the other strategies to change that relationship to our anxiety. So I had extreme anxiety. It was debilitating. I couldn't enjoy my life the way I wanted to. I couldn't function the way I wanted to at work, at my gigs. I'm a musician. I just wasn't there. I had to leave a few gigs because I felt so bad. I just made up an excuse and left. That's interfering with my life. That's extreme anxiety. And guess what? That's okay. Because I came to the point to realize that it's okay to feel this way. What's not okay is if we just keep doing the same things over and over, and we get the same results. That's not okay, because that's just going to perpetuate that through the rest of our lives. So we can make a stand here and start choosing a different path to go down so that we don't have this extreme anxiety anymore, so that we can start living a more joyful and fulfilling life. Even if we have our anxiety powerful as it is, comes along with us for a while at that level, the more we walk that path and we get knowledge, compassion, acceptance, and we practice those things, that anxiety is going to lower. It's going to have less control over us, and it's going to become less extreme over time, and will produce more long-term calm and peace, which is the results that we want. So if you have extreme anxiety, like I just said, my definition of it, it's okay. It's totally fine. You're here. Let's go forward. What are some symptoms of anxiety? People always want to know these, and I think it's important, because when you hear some of the same symptoms that other people have had and you thought you were the only one with those symptoms, that can be really beneficial to just go, oh my God, I'm not alone. Because the truth is you aren't. People can name the craziest symptoms ever, and a million people have had those. But when you realize that, it makes you realize that you're not alone, and that this is something a lot of people have. Then you start digging into it more and see that, wait, people have this and now they don't. How do I learn from them? That's important. That's knowledge. So I don't really need a textbook or write down a list, because I lived these experiences and they're in my head, and hopefully when I talk about them now, I don't fall on the floor in an anxious state. The one that rocked me the most was insomnia. There was just months and months and months and months where I couldn't sleep. sometimes an hour, 2 hours. Sometimes I get 4 and I'd be excited, then another 2, then 1. Then did I really get any sleep? That one really rocked me to my core because insomnia is such a lonely feeling. You're just there, awake, alone, with this anxiety, these thoughts, with the inability to do something so natural that so many people are doing. And you start comparing, and it just gets worse. And I remember one night, though, it finally broke. I just started laughing in bed. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I started laughing, hysterically almost. It sounds crazy, but I was just laughing, starting to question who's not allowing me to sleep. Who is it? There's no one here, nothing here. That's a video for another time, but it was just that realization that it was me, but realizing it, that it was me. Then there's depersonalization. This is kind of a detached, foggy feeling, almost out of body. This happened to me a lot when I was in groups of friends. They'd be talking and laughing, and it was almost like I was watching it happen. And this is because my mind and my body were so exhausted from fighting, from ruminating, from avoiding, from fear and from stress, that it just can't really take anymore. And it just kind of snaps into this out-of-body, detached, dreamlike feeling, which is not very pleasant because you really want to be here and enjoy this, but you can't because you're so internalized and so exhausted that your body just goes into this state. Then one for me that I did find a lot of people had was I had a fear of knives and syringes or needles that were around anywhere. They just scared me. It scared me, the power they had, or the anxious feeling I get being around a knife. I didn't like it, and it was just a powerful, overwhelming feeling. And I don't share that with too many people, but that one really got to me. Just being around those kind of things that were considered weapons got me anxious when I was around other people. For a bunch of reasons, a bunch of thoughts started going through my head. Then there's the feeling of adrenaline just pumping through your body. I mean, it just feels like an electric current. So I kind of had generalized anxiety. I don't like to call it a disorder, but generalized anxiety. I just kind of was in an anxious state all the time. Didn't really have too many panic attacks. I had a handful, but generalized anxiety is just kind of an electric current constantly through your body, and it just wears you out. And it just feels literally like electricity is shooting through your body. And it's not a pleasant feeling. None of these are very pleasant feelings. Then there's just the simple exhaustion, which is just because you're fighting all the time, right? I mean, if you're constantly fighting something physically all day, your muscles are going to be destroyed. So it's the same thing with your mind. If you're fighting every day, all the time, then the same thing's going to happen to your mind. It's just going to get tired and exhausted. But your muscles get sore. Your mind starts to do really crazy things and get very detached and out of body and dreamlike, and headaches, can't sleep, exhaustion. You get these psychological patterns that happen. So it's much different. It's really much worse, I think. But it's the same concept. We need to rest the mind just like we need to rest the body when it's overworked. And that comes through learning new habits and new patterns. So exhaustion was a big one, which also caused headaches, massive racing thoughts, overthinking, ruminating, just getting trapped in your mind because I had no other tool. All I knew was my thoughts. That's who I am. I have to go in there and I have to believe all these. If they're coming and they're saying scary things, then that's just me. And that means they're probably going to happen. The funny thing is, all those thoughts that I had never happened. Whether it was hurting myself, hurting other people, doing something crazy, this is going to be me forever, I'm going to be in a mental institute, it's never going to change, whatever it is. Those never happened. And that was a realization too. If my thoughts are me, why aren't any of those things happening? Because they're not you. Your thoughts aren't you. But when they're racing 1,000,000 miles an hour and you're ruminating in there and there's no gap, then that's where you're at because that's all you can see. And that creates exhaustion, depersonalization. All these symptoms are interconnected and linked with each other. And I think really the biggest symptom of anxiety is that you just feel like you lose yourself. You just feel like you're not a person anymore. You're just kind of this shell that walks around and tries to enjoy things but can't because you're just so tired, so mentally and physically exhausted. You're constantly in a fear state and you don't really know why. And we don't even know that we are perpetuating our own fear state. We don't even know it, which is okay, because why would we? No one tells us anything. For a long time, especially in America, anxiety was just hide it, suppress it, right? Or fight it away. But that doesn't work. And it took me to have to learn it, to have to learn from people who have been through it and found that out, to implement that, and to change my relationship to it. Now, the symptoms can go on and on and on, but those are the ones that caused me the most pain. The insomnia, the depersonalization, the exhaustion, the headaches, the fear of knives, the ruminating and the overthinking. Those all together created my anxious life. I should write a book called My Anxious Life, but that's what it was. Those symptoms caused me the most pain, but they don't cause me that anymore. So that should give hope for you, because I'm just a normal person who's, somewhat intelligent at times. Sometimes I'm really not. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it. So if you have any of those symptoms, or if you have other ones that I didn't list, because there's plenty that I had, please post them, and I'm sure I had them or somebody's had them. But those were my symptoms that caused me the most problems before, when I was going through this. And the last question I'm going to leave with is your anxiety a mental illness or a disorder or a disease? And my answer, no. And the people that I followed and learned from and look up to, their answer is no. Now, doctors labeled me with an anxiety disorder, and when I left the office, I felt even worse. I felt even more attached and deeper into my anxiety. And then I started to use that disorder tag as a justification for how I was feeling or how I was treating other people or myself. Like, oh, well, I have an anxiety disorder. Oh, I'm not going to get better. You have a disorder. And the brain latches onto that and creates an even more solid identity of this anxious person that we are. I always like to say your anxiety is not a disorder or a disease or an illness. It's a misunderstanding of the processes that are going on. We're leaving things untouched, avoiding it, running away from it, numbing it, suppressing it, fearing it. And we create these habits and patterns and cycles and loops that just keep going on in a chain reaction of reactions. Even if it's a hard trauma like losing a loved one, what causes it to be such a big problem, bigger than it already is, that's the biggest problem, is that we don't think we should feel the pain, or we need to avoid the pain because it's too much, which is understandable. But when we avoid that pain and we run away from that pain, not only is it going to catch up, but it's going to catch up and it's going to get even bigger and bigger. And we're misunderstanding it all because we're not trying to understand it. We're not trying to connect to it, to get closer to that pain. Stephen Hayes, the founder of ACT, said that we hurt where we care. We hurt where we care. So even if you have an anxiety about work or about life in general, it's because you care. It's because you want to lead a joyful life. So it's not an illness, it's not a disease, it's not a disorder. It's just a misunderstanding. And that's partly why you're here. Hopefully I can help you understand it better. Hopefully you can see a professional that can help you understand it better. Hopefully you can read books that can help you understand it better. Hope you can look at your direct experience with it without judging it, so you can see how it works and understand it better. And that misunderstanding can become an understanding. You can connect with that pain, with that anxiety, because like I always say, it'll be your greatest teacher. But people with anxiety disorders, people with anxiety illnesses, people with anxiety diseases, those are the strongest people. So it's not those things. It's a misunderstanding. But those are the strongest people because they're getting through this beast, however they're getting through it right now. Those are the strongest people. So remember that when somebody tells you you have a disorder or a disease or an illness, that you're one of the strongest people. Now we just need to learn some things to help us turn that misunderstanding into an understanding. So hopefully you're doing that here and taking that first step. And if you do like what you see in this video, please like, subscribe, check out my other videos. Hopefully I'll see you there and connect with you, and we can go on this journey together.